Rich, good morning. Good to see you again.
Carlos, good morning. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. How do you feel knowing that our last podcast was the top podcast on the show so far of like 30 episodes?
Kind of a head scratch. Affiliate marketing audience. I assume you caught a direct mail vein somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it was about it, but that's part of the reason we're here is the audience has spoken. They want to hear about direct mail. We're here for round 2. Before the show, we were talking about where to take this, and we decided we're going to do the 10 most common pitfalls that lenders fall into when they build direct mail programs, which I think will be just kind of a good round 2 off of the 101 we gave last time. I'm really curious on how much this overlaps with affiliate marketing traps.
So, I've spent a bunch of time consulting out there for mailers, talking to lenders, helping build programs, getting into programs that are up and running, trying to optimize big programs, some of the bigger ones that are household names and some of the young ones that are starting up. And so I'm fortunate to have seen a bunch of these pitfalls. So I think the best thing to do is just let's dive into the list.
This first one you hit was on the theme of attribution. So talk us through that one. What's the trap, and how would you advise a lender to manage it?
Here's a phenomenon. So you're a lender. We talked last time about how your 2 big channels are going to be Credit Karma and direct mail. And you've got those 2 channels up and running. One of the things you'll notice early on is that when direct mail spikes in volume, that your Credit Karma volume spikes. And there's a good reason for that. A lot of folks will get a piece of mail and they'll go straight to Credit Karma and they'll respond. Now, on the piece of mail, you give them a URL, you give them an invite code. You may even have a copy that tells them, hey, your best rate comes from coming into this URL, but they're going to walk straight into Credit Karma. And it makes sense, right? They're looking for an honest broker. They want to make sure that the deal they're seeing in the piece of paper is the same thing that's available in Credit Karma. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? One of the great things about direct mail is you can test lots of different things. But in any event, you're going to get some of your response coming into Credit Karma. And then somebody in the organization is going to say, hey, we're paying twice for this, right? Because we sent them a piece of mail, so we put a mail CAC against it. And then they came in through Karma, so we have to pay Karma for it. And they'll say, well, let's stop paying double. That's what I get called in for. Hey, can we please stop paying double on this? And the answer is, yeah, probably not. If you stop paying Karma, then you're going to have issues there, right? They're just going to turn it off. Mm-hmm. And if you stop spending them on the mail, you're going to see your Karma numbers go down. Right. The right way to think about it is if you're big, you're spending enough money, you can talk about doing holdouts. So to go quickly into holdout, you can hold out at the geographic level. Right. So you can have some geos where you stay away from Karma. So it's direct mail only geo. That's a relatively straightforward exercise.
Direct mail. Okay. So you go to Karma and say, don't market in Texas or whatever, New York.
Maybe it's random zips, so there's a bias. But,
okay.
And you can do that for X amount of time.
Okay.
You don't want to do that forever. Direct mail, you can sort of do the same thing. You can say, we're not going to mail into these zips. You got your overlap, you got your Karma only, and your direct mail only. And then you can roll up those stats. So maybe you do it for 6 weeks. And then you turn everything back on and you study the results to try to see if there's. The first thing you'll do is you'll figure out how much is incremental. And then you can figure out what's the cost.
Sure.
And sort of do the math to figure out how much extra you're spending. But the thing I would caution folks to remember is that you have to stop thinking about it as double paying, because you're not. You're running 2 channels. You're running 2 channels that run on marginal economics, and they overlap. And you can do things, like I said, you can position your copy on your direct mail piece to tell folks that you want them to come in through the mail, but you're never going to eliminate this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so the second level you get into on this is in the attribution. The attributions is important internally. So internally, you're trying to decide how to divvy up your resources, how to divvy up your capital. Your 2 biggest spend items are direct mail and Credit Karma. How do you decide how much to spend on each? What's the budget for each? That's a function of attribution. So when an account comes in, you're going to label it as one or the other. Now, the logic you use to do that is different for every lender. There's no right answer. You got to pick a way that you're going to do it. And then know that that's going to drive your channel allocation going forward. And you can make changes to it, and that'll make changes to your channel allocation. Mm-hmm. So You got to be very cognizant of it. You want to keep your eye on it. You want to make sure the right people in the organization know exactly how it works and understand the bias it introduces.
Yeah. All right. There's my mind's spinning here. There's a lot there. Let's go here to the consumer for a second. I get the piece of mail. I show up on Karma. I've had clients tell me this. I've worked at organizations where this was true. So like I can directly connect with the problem you're describing here. But I'm putting myself in the consumer side. The mail served as the prompt. So mail tells me this lender's out there. They have something for me. Karma is almost like the validation point. Is this thing for real? Is it good? Are there better offers, et cetera, et cetera? So to me, from a consumer perspective, both of these things are clearly playing a role in my conversion. It's very difficult to quantify what percentage each of those things played in my ultimate conversion, but it's clear both are important the way you described it. The thing that stands out about the affiliate channel in this context is here it's serving as an assisting role, and many lenders are going into the channel wanting it to be a direct channel, right? I'm only going to pay for stuff that they find, et cetera, et cetera. I want lenders to keep that in mind, that when they're in affiliates, it's also a brand marketing channel. It's this validation channel. Um, there's just a lot of roles affiliate plays. And the direct mail example, I think, illustrates it well. But now let's talk finance here for a second, okay? Have you seen organizations go to like a fractional attribution model where they give DM some of the credit, the affiliate some of the credit, or is it black and white? Like either DM gets the credit or Karma. Like what do you normally see organizations do when it comes to like they have to pencil something in for finance at the end of the day and allocate a CAC? So how does this work in practice?
I'm sure there are folks out there that do some sort of fractional assignment, but I haven't seen it. I usually see the one or the other, and you can have complex logic in determining which of the two it is. Typically, I've seen it's going to go one. Every customer is going to have a single label. Now, it's not just right. An easy way to do it is say if the name and address combination is on the mail file, then it's a mail account.
Okay,
that's easy.
Yep,
it's not really accurate. It's not appropriate. And then you can tighten it and you can say, well, if your name and address is on the mail file and we mailed you, 30 days ago, then you're in. Then you're mail. Otherwise, you're Karma.
Yeah,
right. That's better. Right?
Yeah.
So you can continue to sort of get better and get tighter. And I've seen lots of different logic used in that. You kind of I think you veer into some voodoo math. You want to be a little careful of that. So if you try to do some sort of media mix, I think you're in voodoo land and you just sort of outsmarted yourself and you're way overthinking. I'd much rather have an algo that's logical, that makes sense, that everybody can buy into. And everybody knows the bias in it, right? You have to have something. There is no perfect thing. So let's put something out there that's as good as we can make it. Let's make sure we all understand it. Let's operate the business with that in mind. Mm-hmm. And if we need to revisit, we'll revisit.
Let me walk you through something I've seen, which was done for a specific reason. But I want to get your take on, does it feel reasonable? What would you modify about it? The lender chose to attribute anything that came from Karma within, let's call it, 60 days of the mailing date. So we're mailing Jan 1. Let's say there's 1,000 people on the list. If any of those 1,000 folks came in through Karma within a 60-day window and converted through Karma, but we knew they were on the direct mail list, direct mail gets the full credit for that conversion. What I believe was happening there was the lender wanted direct mail to work, and so wanted to stack the deck so that the CAC looked good, the unit economics looked good, et cetera, et cetera. There were some knock-on effects on what that did to the Karma numbers on the finance report. But let's just talk about just DM for a second. Does that feel reasonable to hold a 60-day window and say anyone that was on that list that converted through Karma, but received mail is from mail and we're going to give them the channel credit?
I think a rule like that is sensible. Now, we could argue whether 60 is right or it's 45 or if it's 30. Mm-hmm. But a rule like that is sensible. And again, that's why I say it's important that everybody understands the bias that introduces to the system. Because you're putting your thumb on the scale for direct mail. Now, you could do it the opposite way.
That's the way it felt to me. I don't know.
No, but it definitely was.
Yeah.
It absolutely was. And again, as long as everybody understands that that's what's going on, I think you can run your business that way. Now, you got to make sure you don't make bad decisions on karma. So let's say you set it to something 120 days, or anybody ever. If I've ever mailed you, it's a direct mail account. So you run that for a while, your CK economics are going to look terrible. And so what you don't want to do is say, well, we should get out of CK because the numbers look bad.
Right.
Yeah. There's another piece of analysis you do that talks about the value CK is bringing.
Because you still paid CK for those accounts. So your spend just went up.
Yep.
Your number of accounts didn't change. So now you're artificially inflating your karma CAC, right?
You're gonna put your thumb on the scale one way or the other. Now, and that's why the holdout analysis might be really helpful. So if you're of a big enough scale, right? So your karma, to me, a scaled marketer is going to be somebody who's channel number 1 and 2 are direct mail and karma. Your direct mail, I'm more familiar on that side, but you're doing 50-ish million a year.
That's dollars you're spending in the channel.
Yeah, sorry, or no, pieces. So
pieces. Okay, 50 million pieces. So dollars, 25 million.
So you're 4 million pieces. That puts you in the league table. That kind of puts you squarely in the middle. You're in the top 40, but you're not in the top. And then you're roughly equivalent amount of spend on karma. Right. So and it's scoring the karma 1 and 2. Actually, if you don't have one of them, then it's a different set of issues. But if you're there, you're sort of a scaled marketer, and that's when this is going to become super important.
But let's go to your holdout idea. If I ran the holdouts and I found that, what would be a potential result?
So the first question you're going to ask your holdout analysis is, what's the incremental value of the piece of direct mail? Right. So we'll start with that. Yeah. So you've got, here's a place. Let's assume we can do random zips. So we take every zip in the US, we randomize it, and let's assume karma is cool with turning us off in some, and direct mail is cool with turning us off in another set. So we got 3 sets. We got both. We got one, and we got the other. So now we let it run for a while, and we look at our results. We look at our CAC, let's just say, simple CAC calculation, and spend, like fully loaded CAC. On the direct mail only, you don't have any karma spend, and on the karma only, you don't have any direct mail spend. Mm-hmm. And then we looked at the, how many folks are we hitting? We could do the math to say how much value was there to us to having the second channel, right? Because we know what would happen without one of them, and we know what happens with both of them. Yeah. So we'll see more growth when we have both, and we'll spend more money, and we can sort of tease out how much each one's worth. Now, to your fractional comment, maybe you can turn that into some fractional allocation.
Cool. I mean, it sounds to me, if I was a CMO listening to this, I would say, okay, look, there's a wide range of potential CACs per channel. Fine, understood. At the end of the day, I'm looking at these channels more as a combined entity. That could be another way to look at it, which is like, look, I don't know attribution. I'm not going to go do all these geo holdouts. They're expensive. They're time consuming. I'm not going to measure them perfectly anyways. Let me look at the 2 piles of money I'm spending, and let me look at the result those 2 things deliver. And if in total it works, I'm good. I'm not going to agonize over this thing. I'm not going to drive my organization crazy. I'm not going to hire 10 analysts to build stat models. Like, what's the point?
So a couple of thoughts here. So, reading some of your content on, the intricacies of affiliate marketing, where would you stack this on your list?
Oh my, nowhere close. Like, are you kidding me? I'll caveat my reaction though. I tend to work with growth companies. So they're either fintechs or they're more scale organizations that are leaning into a particular lending category, and they want, 50 to 100% growth. Like, they're looking to really move. This is not the place, right? Like, if we're going to save $10, $15 an account, we need to be doing things that double and triple the program, and perfecting this isn't the thing.
The other thing I'd say is if you're not doing mail or you're not doing karma, like, go focus on that, right? Because if you're not on karma and you're sending out direct mail, you're drumming up interest. They're going to karma and they're finding your competitors.
That's the thing. And just add to that, and then we'll move to your number 2. The companies I see that are really firing on all cylinders tend to have similar number of accounts coming through mail and karma. I've seen this over and over and over again. So if, for the sake of the example, if you're doing 10,000 accounts in karma, but you're doing 3,000 accounts in mail, something's likely wrong with mail. You need to fix mail to get to 10,000. Forget about attribution. You need to triple mail before you worry about this, right? And if you flip it, it's the same thing. If you're doing 10,000 in mail, but 3,000 in karma, you're not showing up correctly in that channel.
I always tell people that those two are 1 and 2 and different organizations, and that may determine where you put your thumb on the scale. Right. So if you got the 10,000, 3,000, regardless of which side it is, put your thumb on the 3,000.
Probably one of these things where when your next VP of partnerships or your next CFO come in, they're going to look at whatever the old team did and say, oh, that was wrong, and just flip it. And it's just, there's an organization I'm very familiar with, which I think you are as well. A large credit card issuer. Household name that I think is somewhat famous for continually reorging on product and then on segment and then by channel. And it's just kind of this trio of new leaders come in and they're like, no, it's not by segment, it's by product. And then they flip everyone around and it's musical chairs. And then 3 years later, it happens. And, over their decades of history, you could probably count how many cycles they've gone through. So yeah, I think this attribution question, it probably lives in the same place. So, all right. So the second one, pitfalls, it sounds like you've seen organizations overreact when campaigns go bad. Like, talk us through that.
When I think about the things that I get calls on, the number one thing is not actually like attribution, even though I put that number one, because I think that's the most thorny issue. But the number one thing I get is, people will call me up and say, we've got our direct mail system up and running. We're doing campaigns. The models are working. We predict X, we get X. We have our arms around the system. And then last month we did a campaign and it came in at like half of what it was supposed to come in. What happened? And I think anybody out there who's done direct mail is familiar with that, right? The campaign that just goes south.
But the important piece to this is it's been working for a while. You didn't change a thing. And then suddenly the results are just crappy.
You know what's going on, like behind the scenes is a boss somewhere who's saying, hey, I don't want to spend any more. I don't want to give you any more money until you tell me that that's an aberration, right? Because I'm seeing, good, bad. Are we all bad now? Or is that just a random bad?
Is the presumption from the client, the lender here, that somebody screwed something up, or that the consumer behavior changed, or that there was a...
Right. So in the moment, you don't know. You're just looking at your dashboards and you're saying, oh man, today was a bad day. We'll probably catch up tomorrow. Tomorrow's, today's another bad day, right? And at some point you sort of have to make a call. This campaign has an issue. So a couple of things to go through on that. So if you're involved in that, the first thing that everybody wants to look at, and I think it's probably the right place to start, is logistics and operation. Did the mail go out? There are ways to do that. If you're scaled mail or you're doing an intelligent mail barcode, so all your pieces have codes on them. Every time it's scanned in the USPS, it generates a record. You should have access to that data if you're scanned. If you don't, then your letter shop provider probably does. It's pretty straightforward stuff. It's not complicated. It's just, here's a bunch of, it's a bunch of timestamps. This piece of mail got scanned here when it entered the USPS. Got scanned here when it got sent across the country, and it got scanned here when it went into the carrier's bag.
Does that reporting exist at the individual level or in batches? Like, how granular is that?
Typically, your letter shop will assign it, and they'll just use the sequence number, 1 through N, and it gets buried into the IMDb. So there's a little bit of, you gotta take that key and match it back to your keys and figure out who it is. But the first thing to do is go dig into that data. You can dig into your postal receipts. So there's this document called a postal receipt that gets generated when you enter the USPS. So if you're, the first thing you want to make sure is the mail went out. And then obviously the next thing you want to do is look at that which was different about this campaign, right? Obviously. Were we trying a different product? Did we make any change in creative? That's sort of the next level of things to look at, is stuff that obviously, not obviously, right? Because obviously wouldn't have done it, but stuff that you made a change, right? We decided to take the 800 number off. We're blowing up the ops fix. And we didn't really think about it. We just kind of did it. And we said, oh, yeah, now we're friends again with the ops folks because we're not blowing up the call center. Make sure, were there any global changes? Were there any intentional testing, big chunks of testing that we did?
Let's take a quick break in the action here, because I'd like to introduce you to our newest sponsor, Fintel Connect. They're an affiliate marketing platform that can help connect you to publishers, influencers, and manage your compliance. You may have heard of platforms like CJ, Rakuten, and Impact, but none of those platforms serve financial services companies exclusively. That's where Fintel Connect shines. Folks that have used their platform tend to talk about their compliance platform and their ability to connect with social media and influencer publishers that you may not find elsewhere. Additionally, because they're FI only, they have a deep empathy for the challenges that lenders and banks have when they run their affiliate marketing programs. I'd love for you to check them out. You can find them at fintelconnect.com, FINTEL connect.com, where you can connect directly with their founder and CRO. Have you ever seen it be the case that the lender approves a certain creative with the 800 number in the top right corner? Nothing changed about it, but the letter shop, for whatever reason, didn't print the number. And even though the intent was to print the number, it didn't show up on the letter. And like, how do you diagnose something like that?
That's kind of thing that can happen. You wouldn't know, right? So you, again, if you're a scaled mailer, you're most likely, you've got a seed file. So be very intentional about your seed.
So you should be receiving every single piece.
So absolutely. So you need to put you and your colleagues' name and address, maybe use the office address, blowing up your home box. But you need to keep an eye on that stuff. And like, I've seen people over architect a seed process, where you mandate that people stamp their mail with the date when they get it. And then you keep it in a folder and it's logged with a bunch of metadata. Yep. You don't need to do that.
So their whole job is, my intent was X. Did you receive X? Just document that for me.
The monitoring service, the seed service, they give you name and address for folks they collect randomly across the country. They may or may not be real names. And you add it into your mail file. And so you're constantly sending these pieces and they can scan them and you can go. They may create metadata. I'm not that familiar with the services. But that's definitely worthwhile. Also look at Compare Media. Compare's got a bit of a lag. Most of your scale mailers have access to that. That'll show you what your creative looks like. Just one more, and that's kind of postal operations. It hurts when you go over a long weekend. So when you're testing or you're reviewing campaigns that went south, you just make sure that you weren't over a long weekend. Well, not all long weekends are created equal. Memorial Day, Labor Day, July 4th are terrible. Thanksgiving's a terrible.
People are distracted. They're traveling. When they get back home, it's a big pile. Yeah.
So you definitely want to avoid that. There's some seasonality. Summer and fall are typically better. Winter and spring.
Why summer better than? I would have expected summer to be a little softer with kids out of school and travel.
In my experience, across the spectrum, you could spend a lot of brain damage trying to figure out seasonality. My experience has always been that late summer and fall are great, spring sucks, and don't mail over the holidays.
So on the other side of these bad campaigns, what are the usual suspects?
So after the operational side, then you get into your model. Right? So you're using your Cisco models to cut. You got your risk model, your response model. Go through and do basic analysis on that to make sure that your mail file is fundamentally differently shaped than all the other mail files. It may be implicit or explicit, maybe intentional or unintentional. Not to say models can go bad, but check your suppressions. So suppressions are typically business rules that are applied on top of statistical analysis. If your suppression logic has the effect of taking all the good people out of the universe, then you're going to have a bad campaign.
How many of these campaigns that go bad or end up being explainable to a specific cause versus the team just concluding, you know what, it could have been these 8 things and we don't really know what happened?
Probably 4 to 1 or 5 to 1, where you end up just kind of shrugging your shoulder.
Oh, so most of the time you just move on and...
No, most of the time
you figure it out.
But 1 and 4, 1 and 5, you just kind of shrug your shoulders. And it's much easier to do that when you've got another campaign that comes in and it does fine. Then it's much more likely to say, okay, something happened. We could spend time on it, or we could go figure out how to.
Have you seen organizations in that latter category that haven't figured it out that actually lose conviction in the channel altogether and stop spending
Absolutely.
just because of one campaign?
Yeah.
What do those conversations sound like internally?
Typically, it's not without merit, but the conversation is, if you can't tell me why that happened, then I don't have confidence in you to give you more money. Like, that's not how you get more money from me. You do stuff that randomly doesn't work and you can't tell me why. We talk about campaigns, right? It's a series of campaigns, right? It's an ongoing thing. If you ever started a program, your first few campaigns always suck. That's part of it. And then you get better and better, and you build your models, and you have stumbles, and you get back up, and you hit a new tier, and then you stumble back down. Right? So it's this ongoing thing. I would argue that's not a terribly enlightened approach, but I see it all the time.
Is the following a viable argument for some of the unexplainables? Could it have been the case that two competitors with similar products dropped in the same window as you did, and like the attention just got spread out, and that's why your NRR? I mean, could it be that simple, or is there more to the story?
That probably causes a big chunk of the unexplained. I had a case once when I was working for a lender, and we had a campaign that went south, like I'm talking about, a series of campaigns. And I suspected it was some competitive pressure, just kind of like you're saying. And then sort of like years later, bumped into somebody from a competitive organization who said, oh yeah, we were targeting your folks.
That one would be very difficult to pinpoint. And I could see how that conversation would be contentious internally with, like, say, a CMO saying, hey, look, like, this could have very easily happened. And a CFO saying, yeah, that's all well and good, but we're not spending more money until we know.
And my recommendation to those folks would be to, again, take the point of view that it's a series. This is an ongoing channel, right? It's a series of things. We have a distribution. We'll have some by the way, some campaigns will do ridiculously well too, but it's a distribution, right? It's every 20 campaign is going to do really great, and every 20 campaign is going to suck. Once you back out all the other stuff, and so it's a statistical inference game, and if you do everything at the 0.05 confidence level, then you're going to have 1 out of 20 look weird. Yeah.
One thing I'm tempted to go into this rabbit hole, I won't, but I'm just going to note it mostly for myself. This whole issue of campaigns going bad in affiliate channels, I see this all the time. Same thing. I don't feel like I changed anything. My volume's down by 40, 50%. Everyone's freaking out. The difference, I will tell you, is I never hear the CFO or anybody internally say, we're going to pull the channel. We're going to pull the cord on this channel. I never hear that. Why? Because it's a CAC channel. Right? It's never blowing up your CAC. You're only paying for what you get. So there's never this existential threat. But the conversation to the partnerships team is same thing. I don't trust you to run it unless you can explain why. Right? And in an affiliate context, there are 18 different things that affiliate could have done to create that result. And there are 18 things you could have done with your product, with your underwriting, with something else that's related. And these things interact with one another. So the note here is I'm going to do a little solo episode sometime in the future on what we just talked about, but for affiliates, what to do when you just take a deep breath and like let another week or two of data flow in. I've seen so many organizations just spin their wheels and look at data and dig and literally derail the entire organization, trying to figure something out that quite honestly is just noise, because these channels are volatile and there's going to be good weeks, there's going to be bad weeks. So as you were talking through all this, and by the way, those are not fun situations when your volume's down by 50% in a big channel. So I can definitely empathize with that. So, okay, number 3, moving on here on your list. You said oversteering on unit costs is a common pitfall. What do you mean by that one?
I'm thinking back to a time when I was working with a lender who said, and this is in direct mail context, I think our cost per piece is too high. We're spending too much on mail. We're spending 75 cents a piece. Okay. Full loaded. And then the client says, I think that's too much. And so I look at it, whatever the number was, I looked at it and say, yeah, that seems a little high. So you go dig in, look at the contracts, so look at where the money's getting spent, come back and say, look, well, here are a bunch of things we can do. We can different process that'll be faster and cheaper. We can source our paper from a different place. We can switch this vendor to this vendor, save some money. We can take this step and roll it into this step, so we don't have to pay that vendor, right? And sort of bring the cost down, cost per piece down. And in this particular case, here's what happens. When you bring your cost per piece down, you're lowering your CAC. And if you're a growth organization and your CAC goes down, you market more into it, right? Because that just means there's swap in. Right? You just enabled swap in. So in a direct mail context, if you can make the unit cost go down, you bring swap in. And what happens when you bring swap in? Well, you spend money. If you do it right, you're going to spend more money than you were spending, absolute dollars. And that was the problem I ran into the client, was they said, look, I hired you to make costs go down. No, we did. We made the costs go down. And we have this much incremental growth, and the incremental growth is bigger than the incremental spend. But that's the case I'm talking about, on over anchoring the unit costs. Unit costs are an important part of the equation for CAC, but not the only part. And oftentimes, if you generalize that story, oftentimes what you see is we throw away great growth opportunities to save a few pennies on the unit cost side.
What would be an example of an opportunity we might miss if we're too focused on unit cost?
Off the top of my head, think about expensive paper. I can get real thick vellum paper that's like feels great in your hand. It's real thick and it kind of pops when you click it.
Yeah.
Or I can get the real cheap kind of newsprint paper. The more you spend on paper, so if you're just looking to cut costs, you might go say, well, let's just print everything on cheap paper. And then what you do is you give up response on that. So that's kind of a way to think about it. So the right answer isn't what's cheapest, and the right answer isn't what gives me the highest response. The right answer is where's the clear
curve. Yeah.
And that's so. I would encourage folks to not over anchor really on either one. If somebody calls me up and says my unit cost per piece is too high, like it's kind of a dead giveaway that you're not thinking about it the right way. Like that's not the way to frame the question or the issue.
Sure.
The issue is my marginal economics don't make sense.
What's a practical way to optimize that whole unit cost to response dynamic? Because there's so many different dimensions, right? There's paper, there's envelopes, there's agencies potentially you could hire on creative. Like there's just a number of cost variables. Like how would you?
Well, I like to tell folks when I get started on something to say, look, if I do this right, especially if it's a cost thing, if we do this right, our response rates are going to go down. Like if I'm good, we will have lower response. And you might kind of say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. But the point is, if you make yourself super efficient, you just open up swap ins, and the swap ins come in at sort of lower average, still above your threshold, and they bring the overall down. Like today, I got to draw my line here. I can't get anybody below this level. If I go and I make the piece cheaper, I just open that up. I'm going to bring them in. They're still lower response. I'm going to bring my average down. So my response rate's going to go down. But it's a growth play. I enabled growth by cutting costs. And so just be careful when you think through the economics of that and the messaging that you send. Right? You should never start by saying I'm going to save cost. You start by saying this is a growth opportunity play. Two ways to make your CAC better. One is to get a lower cost per piece. The other is to get a higher response rate. Both good. Attack them both. But don't attack cost in and of itself. Attack cost because it helps you bring your CAC down. Got it. And that's just a dividend you're going to go back spend on more growth.
Are companies that you or the lenders that you've worked with in the past, are they optimizing for total profit from the, like what's the hero metric generally on a direct mail program? Because it colors kind of how I think about this question. Because we've talked about CAC, we've talked about total units, but what I think should matter is like total MPV generated or something like that.
Correct. There's some sort of optimization function that's lifetime value or NPV over your payback period with your discount rate applied, right? Whatever it is, and I hope if you're a scaled lender or if you're on your way to be scaled, I hope you have that math down. Because you got to know what an account's worth. And so you sort of have that down and then optimize to that and optimize to that on an absolute level. Make that as high as possible, right? Subject to constraints of, we're not going to do anything less than zero on the margin. We only have X amount of cash, or whatever it is. Like put your constraints in there, but that should be the optimization. And then everything, anything you do on cost per piece or unit cost is is flavored by that. And it takes into account, I would just automatically take into account reinvestment. If I save $1 here, we're going to spend back on more growth. And that incremental growth will come at lower margins, because if it was big fat margins, you would be doing it. And so just understand that your cumulative program is going to look worse. And that's great. That means you're doing your job.
Performance over time calibrated by audience. And if you're continually expanding the audience, that's a good thing. But your performance metric, your global program will look like it's deteriorating. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Are the best in breed mailing down to like a penny in MPV per piece sent, or like how much buffer do folks generally leave?
If you use the logic that we talked about, which is, I understand my duration and I understand my discount rate, then yes, I would say down to 0.
Yeah.
Again, as long as those two things are built in and well understood. So, we know by duration, I mean some combination of payback and life of the loan. And then the discount rate is just the amount that we want to make. Right. So you put all that in the equation. So the equation factors all that in, and then you just say, if this thing is 0, or I do it down to 0. Right. So the limit as n approaches 0. Yeah. The sum of everything up until you get 0 and then stop. I think that's pretty normal. Now, it gets articulated in different ways. Every lender has a different version of their optimization function, because everybody's got a different payback. Everybody's got a different discount rate.
I'm going to move us to the next one here, Rich. I'm curious where this one's going to go. Pitfall number 4 that you've seen is drowning in complexity. So what kind of complexity, and I guess how have you advised clients out of this trap?
So complexity in this scenario, I'm thinking about lots of segmentation, lots of models, lots of different cut thresholds, lots of different contingent logic to determine what makes a mail file and what doesn't. It grows over time, right? So nobody starts by saying I'm going to build a complex process, right? You start by saying I'm going to build a sophisticated process, and it ends up getting complex. And it ends up getting complex drip by drip. Every time we do a campaign, we say, hey, what would make sense? We can just de-average this. Here's a segment that we know is working for us. If we cut it here, this piece works really well. And this piece, if we do this to it, could actually do even better. So now we've taken that segment and we've sliced it. We de-averaged, which is great. Mm-hmm. It's great. This is what we're supposed to be doing. But now you do that every cycle, for N number of years. And now you've got a completely unwieldy process. You'll have a person in your organization who's the tribal knowledge keeper. Yeah. That's the only person who knows how this thing works. Any new person coming in is not going to know. We talk about a campaign going bad. Like that's probably your number one. That's the culprit.
So we're talking about different over a number of years, we are saying, hey, this pocket could be a little better if this pocket could be a little better. So now we're combining audiences and creatives and pricing and is that?
I've got product 1 and product 2, and here's my segment. And I do a test where I've got product 1 and product 2 into the segment. And I say, well, this part of segment likes product 1, this part of segment likes product 2. So let's cut segment in half based on this attribute. Yeah. And these guys get product 1 and they get product 2. That's great. That's what you get paid to do that. Yeah. But now you do that 100 times a cycle, and then you do N number of cycles, and now you've got.
Yeah, because it's the permutation of audience, product, creative, those 3 things basically.
Right. And there's logic, right? So you've got to write a piece of code every cycle that goes against the bureau file. Who do I want to mail? And then once I decide who I want to mail, what product am I going to put them in? What creative am I going to put them in? Yeah. How am I going to map them into this campaign? That's where the complexity kills.
I want to pause here for a second to tell you about one of our sponsors, Spinwheel. They've built an API that streamlines your lending application form with just 2 fields. When a customer shares just their birth date and phone number, they can go grab all the information needed to pre-fill their application form. So regardless of what channel you play in, you know that the higher the application rate goes, the lower your cost of acquisition becomes, and the more media you can buy to generate growth. Additionally, they can give you real-time verified consumer credit data and seamless payment processing, which can help you serve customers beyond the initial application. To see a demo, go to spinwheel.io or check out the link in the show notes. It'll hook you up straight with their head of growth. What's the telltale sign that an organization has oversteered here? You mentioned the one person in the whole org that knows what's going on. Is that it, or are there other signals?
Pretty good one. You also see it in denominators. When you start to see small denominators, like small samples, what that means is you're cutting it up too thin.
What end gets you nervous?
And direct mail, well, again, this depends on the products on the spectrum.
Sure.
So if you're in subprime, you can have small ends. You've got high response rates.
So like thousands or hundreds?
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands is small for subprime.
And then a bigger number than that is small for prime.
For prime. Yeah. I've seen the following play out in other channels. I'm curious if it holds up in mail. But when things get complex, I noticed organizations take too long to make decisions and to just get basic shit done, because everyone and every meeting needs so much context around what's going on. Back to your point around, if only one person understands this, by definition, anytime we have a substantive meeting about the topic, I need to explain, because no reasonable human could keep this in their mind. Like, is that something you see?
Definitely part of it, although we were talking earlier about having too many folks overseeing this is going to be a problem in and of itself. But certainly that's definitely a red flag. We have to explain it, and I need the one person who knows that. I need the tribal knowledge person to come in and explain it. And then they explain it to me, and now I can't explain it to the next person. And you see that a lot because this stuff gets complex. And again, it's the basic activity is a good one. The de-averaging, the segmentation, the testing, the lots of different versions. Those are all good things. It's taking advantage of the channel. But you got to keep an eye on when do you recollapse things, or do you build infra that allows you to do that?
Yeah.
All right. That's the other thing. The other way to do it is create a really sophisticated infrastructure that just enables all that.
If you're the head of marketing, you inherit something like this. It's too complex and it's obvious. What's the path out of that? Like, what's the process back into something more reasonable? Like, how would you set the direction for the team to kind of step back?
I would search for swap ins and swap outs. So, we're super complex. We are sort of customized down to these razor thin segments. I would want to look at the marginal economics on every discernible combination. And a couple of things that you'll notice. One is you get a really small sample because there's so many different groups. And that's a problem in and of itself. So it needs to be rolled up a certain way. And you can sort of demand, I want these to be rolled up so that they're readable. And that's our exercise. It's to roll this up so that we have readable segments that still sort of make sense. And then it's a swap in, swap out argument. All right, what do we see? Because I can guarantee you there's stuff that you're doing that you shouldn't be doing, and vice versa. And it's harder to see the vice versa because you're not doing it. But the first thing I would want to do is look at the marginal economics for every permutation. Understand that the sample is going to be too small, because that's the first thing that, like, the one person who knows what they're doing will tell you that.
Yep.
They'll say, look, I can do that for you, but you're going to be talking really small sample at each point. You're going to say, well, that's part of the problem. Yeah. If you can't read this stuff, so we need to roll it up to a level where we can read it, and roll it up intelligently so that we're reducing the layers along the way.
Is that an incremental process, or is there a moment where somebody senior says, you know what, we have 1,000 different product segment channel audience combinations. I can't live with I can't be above 20. So that's the mandate. Get me down to 20. And then from there, once you've rebooted, maybe you incrementally go from 20 to 40 if you see value. Like, which way do you normally see this play out?
If you're big, household name-ish, somebody we've heard of, you're probably going to have to stand up a separate approach, separate system running in parallel. And then you're going to
horse race.
Well, not horse race, but you're going to get it stood up so that it's running, and then you're going to slowly turn the dials until it's 100%. Got it.
You'll edge your way in. It's like 5% of my traffic is this new thing.
But not horse race. Right. So definitely not a horse race, because we're not comparing the two.
Okay.
Right. Because we're declaring we're going to this less complex way.
Got it.
And we're just going to set and the reason is we can't just turn the old way off because we're household.
We're too invested.
We've got, there's stuff at stake here that we can't threaten.
Right.
And so I would build it in parallel and then start it with 10% and then slowly turn the dial. So you're 100%.
Is that like state by state, or how would you actually turn up the dial?
No, I would do it off the top of my head. I would do it randomly, and maybe we do it at some kind of segmentation level or product level.
Okay, so some portion of your file goes to the new thing, and then you're keeping.
Yeah, maybe we say if we're multi-product, we say, hey, this kind of small and growing product, we're going to flip over to the new system first, take full advantage of it, and learn our way through it, and then we'll slowly take on the rest of the product.
I mean, it does sound like a horse race, though, the way you're describing it, because I have part of the file on the new thing, part of the file. Aren't I comparing CACs and account volumes?
Yeah, we're certainly like if we're really far off, then it was a really bad idea.
Yeah.
So I guess along the way, you want to be checking your metrics to make sure that you weren't making fundamentally bad decisions. But my guess is if you're doing this exercise, you're only doing it because you were so complex that you couldn't kind of operate your way out of the bag.
Right.
And so getting better results is going to be pretty easy, I would think, right? Because you're going to be super slow. You're going to be super error prone. Right? Anytime you get this, again, to the nth degree, you got all that customization. We're not going to get halfway in it and decide to not throw the switch. But your point is solid. If you're monitoring the results and the new system is much worse than the old system, then
you have to reconsider
something wrong.
Yeah. Cool. Your fifth one here, making decisions on a sample that's too small. We kind of hit this a little bit.
And so having just made the arguments I was making about sample too small, you got to make decisions, right? I'm sure you see it all the time. You have to make decisions on samples that are pretty small.
Yeah.
Right. And so you do your math and you have your confidence intervals that you put on stuff, plus or minus 1.96 standard errors, and you got your chi-squared test, and you got all this stat sig stuff you do to see, is the test different from the control? Is it better and is it different? And that's all good stuff. You should do that. That's part of being disciplined. So again, you got to be careful that you don't make too many decisions based on small data. And you got to make sure that you don't avoid decisions because you have small data. If you're doing testing in direct mail, you're trying to find new things that work, and you want to limit your sample so you're not spending too much money on it, but you want enough samples so you can read, and it's hard to get that right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you're faced with something that is better, like a test that's better than the control, but it's not statistically significantly better than the control. What do you do with that? That's something where you've got to get comfortable in sort of leaning into results that aren't significant to make them significant. But at the same time, you want to be careful to not overread the results you're seeing. So it's tough. I mean, it's getting your sample right is really, really complicated because direct mail is so expensive, right? That N, that denominator is just so expensive, right? At the 50 to 60 cents a piece. It's just.
Yeah. Yeah. And the conundrum there is if you require an N that's just so large where the decision is blindingly obvious, you've probably spent more money than you need to reach the decision. And if you go too small, you might be deciding on noise and oversteering. So I guess the question this poses to me is, it sounds like in that world, having someone in the team with some experience in the space sounds valuable because they've built up an N over their career in their mind. They've seen campaigns, they've seen failures, they've seen successes. Like, they bring a level of grounding to the team that if, let's say it's a fintech great marketers but have never played in the channel, you risk them making a decision off of a sample that's too small without the historical context. So I guess the question to you is, like, do you typically see someone on direct mail teams with some longevity in the space, or can teams that are fresh to the channel make this thing work?
Both. I think typically you do see somebody who's been there, the tribal knowledge person. They exist almost every organization. But But I do think you can make it work coming in from the outside. Like I think that's and I think I've seen some examples of that of folks who have come in from outside or maybe from a different segment or different products and make it work. Where I was going to go is more, as opposed to thinking through what's the right sample size for this test, think through as a kind of a series of, like, what's in my head is, let's try 10 things with small sample. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the 3 best performing of the 10, and we're going to do another round with enough sample to read. Like, I like that approach. It's not perfect, right? Because you'll miss some winners and you'll catch some losers. But it's, I think you get a much better chance of ending up with something successful. If there's a 10x in there.
Exactly. Yeah, you're hoping for something that's so outperforming out of those 10 that even though it's small sample, you still get the signal.
Like, that's the way, I think that's the right way to approach it is again, it's this notion that our direct mail program is an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
Right. And it's going to go up and down. And so our tests, we're not trying to figure out the result of every single test on the first cycle. We're just trying to cull the bad ones and let the good ones show themselves.
Yeah.
And then we put more sample in because we're running a disciplined machine. So we do want to get the right read. We want to get the read on it, but let's do a bunch of experimentation. Let's make decisions on small sample.
Yeah, this is reminding me actually of a conversation I had recently with one of my clients in the affiliate space. So the context here was their application page was way underperforming their peers. Like I'm very calibrated on what these things look like. In an affiliate channel for their product, they should be seeing like a 40% application rate. So people hit their landing page from the affiliate, 40% should complete the form. That's like a good number in their category. They're at 12%. So that's not you're missing by a little. That's like you're just so off into left field, like you're not even close, right? And the conversation we're having now due to technical constraints is on the edges optimization. Oh, let's replace that field with that. And I was thinking about this. I was like, no, 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 no. Actually, I wrote a post about this recently. The approach there is an incremental change. You're nowhere near the global maximum. You're on the wrong hill completely. So what you need to do is just design something totally new. I don't even care what it looks like. Just make it so radically different. And by the way, just go into the affiliates, go see who's ranked 1 and 2 and 3. They probably have a decent app. Just kind of get something kinda close to that. Put the logo, put the like, if it's a 2-pager, make it a 2-pager, like, none of this stuff is trademarked, it's just publicly available information. Borrow the stuff you like and reboot the thing, and if you went from 12 to 28 in one go, great, now you can optimize. Yeah, now we can get to 40, but let's not optimize from 12. So and, someone, there's actually Eric Watson, I don't know if you knew him from Capital One. He was a credit executive over there, and I happened to work with him for a long time. A physics major, super quantitative guy, and he commented on my post, and he's like, "Actually, what you're saying here, I agree with, but what you're more generalizing is the risk of trying to incrementally getting your way out of this global maximum, local maximum thing. Like, if you're just on you're on the wrong local max, there's no reasonable way out of that increment. It might take you 4 years to piece by piece get out of that. You just gotta reboot. And I think when you were suggesting, like, the 10 radically different approaches and see which one of the 3 pops and then optimize from there, that it feels like we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, so I got a couple thoughts to come from that. One is we see the same thing in direct mail, where if you're starting a program and you need to design your first piece of creative, it should look exactly like competitors. There's no magic in it. Just go get them out of Compare Media and just copy it. Just swap out logos. That's the exact same thing. Another thing, though. So you said you go to the organization and they said, "Oh, we've got all these technical constraints." I hear that all the time. What does that mean? I mean, like in your example,
Yeah.
I'm converting at 12.
Yeah.
Everybody else converts at 40. And I'm going to tell you, oh, I don't have the resources to go fix that.
We're in the business of fixing it. Yeah, I don't know what to do with it. I mean, I'm an advisor, so I can't really shake the boat on that one.
You know, like I remember talking to somebody about the direct mail, and you know, they were just starting a program. They showed me their piece, and I said, well, there's an invitation code on it. You need a hard key that you can put on there that folks can type in to pre-fill. Helps all your tracking. It's just generally a good thing to do. Yeah. We don't have the technical resources. But what do you mean? Like, how can you not do something like that? Yeah. And just like, how can you not want to spend your time getting 12 to 40? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, the further color on that one wasn't the we won't do it. It was a not now, it's a later. So like there was a little bit more nuanced. But the point stands. Like if you can stand to triple a channel and the blocker is a technical constraint, and this thing matters to you, like
I'd love to see Friday.
thank you. Yeah. Like it just it must imply that there are 3 bigger things, right? Which is great, right? Because we're growth state, lots of opportunities. So like it could have very well been the case. But yeah, so that one just reminded me of that. Your 6th pitfall, Rich, was you called it model addiction / bias. Walk us through that one. I'm curious. I hear models and I hear addiction and my ears perk up. So what's the issue here?
The situation here is we've been doing our direct mail for a while. So we started our direct mail with some business rules, and we made our way through it. We got enough samples so we could build a good model. And so we build our model. We do our campaigns using our model. We only mail the folks with the high score. Everything looks great. And so we've grounded ourselves. We know that this model score gives us this performance. And we've done a bunch of campaigns with it. Everything looks great. Well, no, so everything's looking great until it starts to degrade. The model starts to age. It gets out of tune. It starts to degrade. Our performance at the exact same level gets worse and worse and worse. And we say correctly, hey, it's time to upgrade the model. Let's go build a model. Let's go build a new model. Now, the problem we have is we've been using the old model. And so the universe we're picking up is everybody who passed the old model. And so now when we go to build the new model technically is going to tell us, of the people we have been mailing, who do we really, really like? And who in there should we not be mailing? That's good information, right?
Because your sample's now biased to just the mailed.
Exactly. Yeah. And so now if we go to build, so we'll sit down to build a model. And when we build a new model, we're only looking at the folks that look really good on the old model. And that's going to create an issue. The model's going to be blind to the folks that we weren't mailing because it hasn't seen any. And so the question is, what's the right way to structure things so we don't bump into that issue? And the answer is with universe testing.
I was going to say, I have 2 words in my head. And those are the 2 words.
We have to use. Right. So we've got to put some mail out there from folks that didn't pass the model, right, so that our new model can train on them. Right. And there are all kinds of techniques you can use to weight it all correctly. So you certainly don't want to mail too deep into the stuff that your model's telling you not to mail, but you can't mail nothing down there. You have to be, and maybe you don't go all the way down. So if your model tells you to mail 6 through 10, maybe you mail into 4 and 5 randomly here and there. Just give the model something to pick on. Just remember, your new model is only going to be as good as the data you give it. And the more dispersion you have, the tighter the model will end up being. And so that's a trick. I mean, that's an issue I see a lot where folks get addicted, right? Because they didn't do enough universe testing. And now you can't improve your model in a sort of sophisticated way. Now you can always, you could build a model. I've done it. You build models on biased populations, and you just have to be real careful using them. And a lot of times they'll hold up, and you find you can begin to turn off the old model and get good performance. But that's just something to keep an eye on. Make sure you're doing universe testing along the way.
2 questions on that one. Do you have any rules of thumb on? You mentioned a situation where decile 4 and 5 don't perform. How do you make that judgment call of, do I mail just 5, 4 and 5, 3, 4 and 5? Like, how much money as a percentage of my universe test should I be spending on like kind of non-response audiences? But I imagine that's going to be contentious with the CFO. Of, hey, you're knowingly mailing people that won't perform for analytical reasons. Like, how do you defend that spend?
So, yeah, I think you're the ratio has to be pretty small. It doesn't have to be too big. So you wouldn't want it to be bigger than, say, 10%. And 10% might be a good goal. And not every time, right? So if you're doing monthly campaigns, you don't need to do it every month. You can do it a couple of times in a X month cycle, just to have the data out there. And I would position it as R&D and make sure everybody knows that that's an R&D expense. And if the folks in the organization making the decisions, have an issue with that, then there may be a signal of a different issue.
Yeah.
I see the modeling, the addiction problem all the time. And so that's why I put it on the list. And the way out of it is universe testing. I've talked a couple of times about the infrastructure and the culture you put in place around testing. And I think universe testing is super important. It's much easier on response than it is on risk.
Yeah.
Doing a risk universe test is going to be, I'm not even sure I would advocate for that. I mean, it's super helpful.
Right.
And, a lot of times, like the place you and I used to work, you could go back and just find mistakes.
Sure.
And then just treat that as a risk universe test, right? We accidentally did something wrong. Now that becomes the modeling set.
If we were to do risk universe tests, I don't want to go too far down a tangent, but would direct mail be the right place to do that, or would it be in a different context?
Well, I think you'd want to start with reject inferencing, right? So you're not spending any money other than on data. I think that would be the place to start. It's so attractive to think I'm going to mail into these people who I know are bad,
right,
and they're going to respond. They're going to take the account, and they're going to go delinquent on it because it's going to tune up my model. Sure. Like I said, I think again, if you're big enough and you have some of these other pitfalls, you've probably done it accidentally. And we should have brought that up when we were talking about campaigns going bad. But when you make a mistake like that, that's. Like after you get over the fact that there was a mistake and there's some sort of impact to the organization and, the boss is yelling about it. When all that's done, you've got a good data set. So be sure to use it. Right. Right. Don't throw that thing away, especially if it was a risk issue, because it's super expensive for you. You may as well get some benefit out of it. So anytime you make a mistake, you need to, your first thought probably needs to be contained, but your second thought needs to be, how can I use this data set to make things better?
Going back to the response models here for a second, what are some signs that an organization is in need of a universe test? And if I don't do that, like let's say I fail to universe test for a prolonged period of time, what are some tangible things I might notice about my campaign that tells me it might be time to go back and do one?
Well, I think the most obvious sign is that I'm getting different performance when I do the same thing. So your general expectation should be, if you do the same thing in period 1 and period 2, you should get the same result. And if you consistently notice that you're not, even if it's not always worse, it's just different, then that's a sign that there's something going on in the system. And you know what? A response model has kind of a short shelf life. Things change. Like I wouldn't believe, you want to be real careful with something older than 6 months, just because the things change in the marketplace, right? The world changes every few months, especially when you get into ratios of credit attributes, right? Which is what's your model's built off of, right? And your own biasing, right? You got to be really careful with that. So the first thing to look at is like the models we're relying on, when were they developed? Now, a risk model's got to have a little age to it because it takes a while to show up. The behavior does, but response model doesn't. And then the second thing would be that inconsistent performance. We should, when you're doing campaigns, you should always have some segment in the campaign that's exactly like something you did last time. And it should just be very consistent. And it's just a tracker, right? So you can see immediately if something weird happens, it'll show up there, all apples and apples. And you know that there's something weird going on. That's usually the best sign. You do the same thing and you get a different result consistently.
I like that. Cool. Let's move to your number 7. Sounds related in some way because we're still talking about response, but pitfall number 7, reading too much into non-response.
Yeah, this is one I see a lot, and it's important, especially in fintechs and younger companies. There's this tendency to want to think that everybody reads your mail. And that if somebody doesn't respond to a piece of mail, it's because the offer wasn't appropriate to them for some reason. Right. And so you scratch your head on that. Why am I not, why is this, what is it about the piece that is not resonating with the audience? When, what's really happening, remember that if you're in a prime segment, 99.5% of your mail generates nothing. And I would argue, it's hard to get data on this, but I would argue the vast majority of that just got thrown away. People aren't reading the mail and deciding they don't want the offer. They're just not reading the mail. And so keep that in mind. And then there are things that drive both who reads the mail and how they react to it that you'll never get in your model. Like, do they have a bad day? Because that's probably the biggest indicator whether you look at your mail. Are you in a hurry? Did you get home late? Right? These are the types of things that drive whether somebody interacts with your mail. So don't overthink it.
Is your infant son having a meltdown?
Do you have a headache? It could just be something like that. This is stuff you're never going to get in your model. But I hear this a lot with clients who are fintechs, which is we know that doesn't work because we printed it and it didn't resonate with the audience. And I always want to say, well, maybe, but let's not abandon it. Just, again, don't put too much. There's not a lot of signal in a non-responder. And so don't overread that signal. A lot of it's going to be noise.
This is a quick plug here for my marketing agency. It's called New Market Growth. We do nothing but help fintech lenders accelerate their growth in affiliate marketing channels. Our services are both strategic and operational. And if you want to learn more about how we can help you, find us at newmarketgrowth.com or email me directly at carlos@newmarketgrowth.com.
So there's the noise element, which I think we've talked through, and I'm just putting some math on it. If only 10 basis points of your audience is gonna convert, that means even if you send 10,000 pieces, what am I down to? 10 people. So if those 10 people had headaches or their kids were screaming, those 10 responses could look like 3. And now you're sitting here agonizing over the piece where it's no, look, you're living in small sample. Feels like a lot, 10,000, but your expectation's 10 people. And if those 10 people were having a bad day, that just blew up your campaign. So I hear the noise dimension, but
yeah, and that's a version of the sample size argument. I mean, there's more to it though, where you say, what I'll hear is some version of, well, we tried it and it didn't resonate with the audience.
We literally tried it once.
Yeah. We call responses ones and we call non-responses zeros, but they're very different characters. So there's a different implication of signal and noise in each of them. So I like to caution people about that.
Yeah.
And another thing it brings up, so your point brings up, and I'm sort of there too, is the importance of getting them into the envelope. I think that's the big, indirect mail. If you get into the guts of direct mail, I think one of the more important parts of it is getting them into the direct mail or getting them into the envelope, making them open the envelope. And so, I would always, the first thing you want to look at when you're looking at direct mail programs, what does the envelope look like? And how much testing have we done on that? Because if folks aren't open the envelope, even if they're good, those 10 people you're talking about aren't going to find us.
How do you know whether one campaign, how do you know what the open rate is? That's the nice thing about digital is you have all this transparency, and in the physical world, you kind of lose that.
No, we definitely don't. You can do OE testing, you do outer envelope testing, and you can sort of back your way into it. So, if you print try an envelope that has your logo on it versus one that doesn't. Try one that says, great offer inside versus one that doesn't. Try one that says important information inside. Open immediately. Try one that's a different size. So sort of understand how the envelope impacts your response. Because it's real. I mean, those are incremental responders. There are responders that, whatever your envelope looks like now, there are people who would have taken your offer if they just looked at it. But they didn't look at it because your envelope needs testing. So I would always advocate, and I think anybody I've worked with would tell you that OE testing is super important. As important as some of the other detailed stuff.
Yeah. What have you seen? Walk me through practicalities of an OE test? Like, what are some of those variants?
Well, we talked about, important information. That's what you should try that. Is your logo on the piece? Can a person tell that it's a credit offer from looking at the envelope? Yes or no? There's not a good or a bad answer.
Okay, but it should be differentiated.
I mean, it's different in different segments. Typically, subprime, you want a plain envelope. Upmarket, you want a branded, promotional. Typically.
What do you think the underlying psychology there is?
If I'm competing in upmarket, I need to have a stellar offer so I can sort of beat adverse selection. And if I do have a stellar offer, I should put it on the outside. I want you coming in looking for that.
Yeah, I'm thinking the Amex pieces I receive. It's clears from Amex. It's kind of a high
promotional,
but also kind of high gloss. It looks like the sender spent some money on it. And you're right, the bonus is pretty clear, 100,000 points or whatever.
That's what they're competing on. Yeah. So if you got it, flaunt it. And then in subprime, what you want to do is avoid. In general, you want to avoid anything on the outer envelope. If you notice, they're all white OEs, just plain white envelopes.
The psychology here is, I'm not sure who sent it. It might be important. Let me see what's going on.
Or I get declined all the time. Last thing I need is another offer. I'm not even going to look at it. That's why, in subprime, I always like to say the most important message is you're pre-approved.
So if you were going to go with a message on the OE, it would be that.
I would say you're pre-approved and fast access. Those are the things that are top of mind for that audience.
I still get blank OEs. I mean, I have a high FICO, and I still get the white plain envelopes. Yeah. I'm always curious. Who sent it? What is this?
Yeah, for a long time, SoFi was doing plain white OEs. I think they've gone to a branded piece now.
The plain whites I see these days are personal loans, some kind of term loans, $20,000, whatever. The cards tend to have the logos.
Upmarket credit card, is very promotional, and very, competing on long teasers.
0% for 20 months, 100,000 points. Yeah, that sort of stuff.
Travel rewards.
Got it.
Or cashback, category, 5% on this category.
Got it. Okay. Moving on here. Your number 8. I like this one a lot because it comes up a ton in affiliate marketing. Pitfall number 8, ignoring the funnel or failing to read market signal. So what's this one all about?
So in direct mail, I assume there's a version of affiliate, but I always like to look at the gross response and net response. Gross response is how many people interact at the very basic level with your piece. And then net response is, who ultimately became a customer. And the pitfall I see is, you can't over rely on gross response or net response. But the issue I see specifically is I got really good gross response on this thing I did, this test I did, but they didn't pull through and my net response is bad. Therefore, it is bad. And I would say that's not the right answer. Yeah. The right answer is I found something interesting in the marketplace, but I haven't figured out how to convert it yet. So let's go figure out how to convert it. And if my product is X and the gross response to this offer is telling me that the actual product should be Y, then I think what we need to do is go put Y out there, not throw it away. And that's the problem I see a lot is, when you get good gross response to something, you've got people raising their hand and saying, I'm interested in more of that. And what you don't want to do is say, well, the funnel doesn't work or it doesn't convert.
Yeah.
It just doesn't convert. So we're not going to spend any time on it. That's the pitfall. Yeah. Is a lot of times that's where, high gross response rate. I mean, you should always want to dig in on a high gross response rate. It could be adverse selection, but it could also be something else. And that's why I said that to me, there's a market signal. You want to make sure you're reading your market signals. What's the audience telling you?
One thing I see a lot in affiliate marketing is that the gross response rate equivalent is just the click-through rate on the listing page. So I've seen offers that have great CTRs and then the application flow is too cumbersome and then the approval rate ends up being too low. And because it doesn't convert post-click, now the affiliate goes into one of these feedback loops where the rank starts dropping because it's not monetizing for the affiliate. The rank drops, and then over time, it's just kind of this self-fulfilling thing where the program ends up failing. But a lot of these programs could be saved by rebooting the application form and having better alignment between the front end targeting model and the back end underwriting model. How many times is a failed direct mail program? How many times could that be saved through kind of just improving those two parts of the funnel?
Yeah. So I've sort of took for granted in my comments there that there's a stream of work that's looking into that to make sure that flow is functioning.
Yeah, you kind of assume that it's baseline good and solid.
Yeah, because I kind of went to like the next level, which is you're bringing in a different audience is looking for something different, and that's really good to know. That's like good market research. But in your case, the case you're talking about,
the thing just doesn't work.
To the extent the thing doesn't work, then you're never getting off the table. The cumbersome application process, right? How many clicks does it take? And
12 pages, documents need to be uploaded, a rep needs to call you, all this stuff.
That's exactly what I was thinking. How likely are you going to stop the flow and say, we need to go do something, we'll come back to you, right? Clean all that. So I was assuming all that was cleaned up. Yeah. That's another grab. I mean, if you're doing direct mail, that may be the thing you focus on first, is to make sure that you've got a funnel that's functioning.
So hit us with some benchmarks here. It could be maybe it's prime or subprime. I don't know which segment you want to focus on. But like I was talking about earlier with affiliates, a high-performing funnel in affiliate has about a 40% application rate and 80% approval rate. Like the alignment's pretty good on the front end and the back model. And the reason it's not 100% is there's drift, right? The time the affiliate pulls the credit data and the time the lender pulls it, there could be a week between. And then there's often times, the affiliate doesn't have a certain attribute that the lender has. So there's like swaps in the model itself. But those are benchmarks I see all the time, 40 and 80. What is that in a high-performing direct mail program? What do those look like?
So, we talked last time, like pre-screening is what you should be doing. In pre-screening, you have to have, 80+% approval. Otherwise, you've got bigger issues. You've got compliance issues you got to deal with. So if you're accessing somebody's credit to curate the marketing list, then you need to be approving 80% of it. So that's a good solid.
Even at subprime?
Oh, yeah. For credit.
For credit.
So the delineation is less subprime and upmarket than it is unsecured and secured. So in any kind of secured loan, you've got collateral as well as credit. And so your approval rates will be lower because the collateral has to.
Yeah, I'm just talking just purely credit.
Yeah, purely credit. 80, I'd be worried if you were 80.
Oh, you'd want higher?
Mm-hmm. I mean, not from a marketer standpoint, but from a compliance standpoint. It's a gray area, like, because another thing people are, well, what should my approval rate be? Well, the answer is higher than it is, most likely. But I don't think there's a magic number.
But it sounds like at 70, you're worried.
Yeah.
And at 90, it sounds like
70. So if you were running an unsecured program and you called me in and showed me your stats and you showed me you had a 70% credit approval, I would tell you shut it down.
Let's fix that first before we go back in market.
Yeah. So you don't get arrested.
Oh, wow. Okay. Because of the pre-approved. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not. FCRA says if I look at your credit data and I use it and I put all my criteria in place and I only pick people who are going to pass my criteria.
And I have that disclosure that says the opt-out, all that. Yeah.
And I mail you and you come back, even with drift, I need to be 80+. I mean, the drift could get me from, so if we had a lawyer here, if we had an FCRA lawyer, they'd say, well, your approval rate should be 100%. So, well, FICO's changed. Okay. I mailed you to 701 and now you're 659. Okay. I'll let you get down to, 90% or 85% for that. But that's kind of how the lawyer is going to approach it is we're going to start by saying, I want every single person you pre-screen to pass credit. And then I'll give you an allowance here for that. But yeah, if you're at 70%, that means that you're not really being a good steward of the firm offering credit. That's purely for credit. And the reason I differentiate secured from unsecured is when you get into secured land, now you've got, Well, before we go there, let's talk about income. So income is an element that obviously should factor in your credit underwriting, and it's not something you can pre-screen on.
Sure.
And so
They can exclude that.
exactly, you can and should get declined for income. So if typically what you see is upmarket folks will print on their piece in the mice type. It'll say, by the way, I expect you to make X.
That's like the ability to pay obligation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you come in, and if you don't make that, and they'll do a bunch of steps to validate, but you should expect, and your credit approval rate doesn't really count against you on your FCRA rate in general. But again, if you're running a super low conversion campaign that's pre-screened and unsecured, you might want to ask yourself exactly what you're doing. But in my experience, especially in upmarket, because it's direct mail, right, and there's if my overall conversion rate is going to be really close to my credit approval rate, minus allowances for income. But those are the two things that you'll fail on. And most folks, once you hit the site, you sort of you've signaled enough intent that the 40% would be really low. That 40% click through rate, or that application rate.
Yeah.
Maybe they're shoppers. 60. Because you'll have shoppers. But again, if you're printing the terms on the piece, you should, if you don't like the terms, you're not going to come. But typically in unsecured upmarket, we're going to get a really high pull-through rate. As you go down, as you get into something that's secured, then you'll start to see folks fall out for collateral.
It's a longer app. There's more to it.
You don't clean title on the house. Car's not worth what you said it was worth.
Yeah, 60. I never see that in affiliate channels, ever. Doesn't matter. They top off at by 50 is the highest I've ever seen.
So it's credit screened, right?
Yeah.
So you come in, you've chosen the offer from the panel, your credit, and 40% will come through on the app. And what's on the app? Like how much info, roughly?
They said it'd be unsecured.
But it's
Basic.
I have to give you name and address, last four social, self-reported income.
Yep. Usually a disclosure of some kind that you're going to run an inquiry. All the standard stuff.
Can you track how many of them come in, look at the application, and go back out and go down another one?
The affiliate knows that.
The lender doesn't.
The lender doesn't.
Right.
But it's a very real number.
That's like the hyper shopper. And your hyper shoppers, your affiliate's going to attract a shopper in general, right?
For sure. And one of the things I tell clients, and I'm quite confident this is real consumer behavior, although I don't know the frequency of the behavior, but I see 3 similar offers. They all feel like they check the box for me, whether it's a credit card or a personal loan. I'm in, say, a Credit Karma or a NerdWallet or an Experian, one of those. And the offers are literally on top. They're next to each other on the page. I can click all 3, open 3 tabs, and now stare at the forms. Like, what are these guys asking for? And I could literally just say, okay, lowest friction one. This one's 1 page, done. I don't want to go through this 5-pager. And it's to the point, this is a real example. I had a client from last year who was showing at the very top of their page how many steps it would take. And it happened to be lengthy, like 5-6 pages. And I asked, why are you doing that? Oh, we've tested it. It's good. I'm like, that's bad. Because let's look at who you're competing with. Who else is doing that in your category? These are all 1-pagers. There is no chance this is the right answer in this channel.
Wow.
It could be the right answer. Like, I don't know how you came up with that.
I'm fascinated though. How did they get there in the first?
I don't know how they got there.
They got it from some other channel?
I could see reasons why in a certain other channel or a certain other audience why that could work.
That's interesting. I love a progress bar. Maybe I should rethink it.
We killed the progress bar. So our first recommendation. And that was one of like 2 other tactical changes. We made them all together. I was like, these are unlikely to be good. Let's just hop to what we think is going to be the better version. It was a 30% lift on their application, right?
So what percent of active application pages in Karma or from Karma, one step in, are So built and optimized the way you're describing.
They're like really lean one-pagers, like that sort of thing.
But kind of like you were saying, you sort of lay down and you say, well, here's my beacon. They're only asking 5 questions. I'm going to get myself down to 5. I'm going to make my page look like theirs.
The category leaders are all very, very optimized. It tends to be the newer entrants that come in with some kind of legacy thing that is usually off the mark. And how they're off the mark is very nuanced. It's lender dependent. But I can't think of a single client we've worked with where, I mean, they didn't hire us for application pages. Just to be clear, they're hiring us for, helping navigate affiliates, get them deals, all of it. But then we have to look at the funnel, and we always have an opinion on the funnel, and we're always able to move the needle on app. And it's simple stuff. This is not rocket science. It's like, oh, you're asking for all this stuff on 4 page. Ask for it in 1 page. Could you do that? Oh yeah, but it's long and people don't like it. Can we try it?
Yeah.
And as soon as we
have
try it,
technical constraints.
it's very real. It's very real. So I was actually speaking with an entrepreneur 2 weeks ago, and I posted about this on LinkedIn, and he hit me up. He's like, it was like incredulous. It was like a Silicon Valley guy. He's like, I don't get why these lenders are doing this stuff. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why don't they have an external party just build a funnel for them, A/B test it, and as soon as they validated that new funnel that was built externally works, why don't they just move all the traffic to it? I'm like, that's brilliant. Like if you had something that was compliant, met their data standards, and you could just bring like 10 off-the-shelf funnels that work, and you just slap their logo on it, you send them the data, and you can prove there's a 30% lift, you're gonna print money. Who wouldn't do that?
Funnel as a service.
Yeah, funnel as a service. Just route traffic. Yeah, I love it. Like, well, yeah, but I mean, there's some real.
But it wasn't invented here.
Right. Yeah. No, there's still like when you really get into the like meat and potatoes of the influencing that happens. There's usually one stakeholder at any given company that fundamentally doesn't believe that other design will work.
The pro progress bar.
Yeah, for whatever reason. Not because they've probably seen it work in other contexts. And that context might have been 5 years ago, different segment, different audience, but the memory is these things work. And I always come back to, if you could test it for a day, I mean, the direct mail, Karma, there's so much sample running through this. You only need to test it for a day. Like if you're trying to read the difference between a 30 and a 40% application, right? One day you'll know. This isn't some it's not the credit experiment we were talking about earlier.
18 months.
No.
Right.
In one day, literally, you will have the answer. And if a vendor could wave a magic wand and route 20% of your traffic to a funnel that just steps you from 30 to 40, I can't think of a single bank that wouldn't do that.
Yeah, you never look back.
But that doesn't exist as far as I'm aware.
What I'm reacting to when you say that is you talk to the Silicon Valley entrepreneur who basically says, I can't believe this industry isn't already optimized. Right. And that's what kind of resonates with me, is I see that all the time too. I can't believe people aren't doing, we were talking about pretty basic stuff here for the most part.
It's to a Silicon Valley app, it sounds basic. To a bank, it's not, because there's so much tech debt and complexity. And that's a good segue to your 9th one. Rich, you said 9th pitfall, combination of infrastructure, culture, bandwidth for testing, and marginal economics. So what's the pitfall here?
To go back to, in a direct mail context, to make your program work, you have to do constant testing. And so it's really important that you have a testing culture and testing infrastructure and testing tools in place so that you can do it. And again, so that you can do it without complexity, which we talked about earlier. And do it with the appropriate N, which we talked about earlier, appropriate sample size, so it's readable. But do enough testing that's small enough where you're not spending too much money, right? So it's kind of like, if you summarize a bunch of stuff we've talked about, it starts with a culture, or just sort of a mindset around constant testing. And we build, it's much easier. It would be much easier. I've never seen it done, but it would be much easier to build a system that doesn't enable testing, right? Because it would be real locked in and sort of a lot of constraints. You can only do these two things with it. But you have to focus on all of your tooling and all of your infrastructure to enable all that testing, and to be able to read the testing, to be able to label your tests correctly, to be able to knowledge management, like some sort of solution in place where you know that you can go back and read these tests. That notion we were talking about, if I'm going to do 10 small sample tests, take the 3 best ones and do bigger samples of those. And there's tooling that's required of it. I mean, it's a mindset, and it's a toolbox, and then there's a buy-in to sort of reading it and doing it that way. And that's kind of what I was talking about. Is sometimes you see the pitfall I see is I'll see people who are doing direct mail without that, without a belief. And I put marginal economics, because to me it all comes down to that belief in the marginal economics. Was that last dollar I spent a good dollar, or was the dollar I spent over here in this segment a good dollar? That's the question you want to ask, and you build your system so that you'll be able to answer that question. And a lot of times you don't see that. You'll see some sort of cumulative economics, or you'll see something that's much broader. It doesn't allow you to drill in on the margin to, was this a good thing or not? Right? I always want to know. Like, I always think about, I'm going to spend a bunch of money on this cycle, and I'm going to spend it in order from my smartest decision to the smartest dollar to the least smart dollar. And then you can draw a line somewhere and say, at this point, I'm not going to spend any more money. That's kind of how you think about it. And so you want the discipline to look at every marginal decision. Was that a good use of the dollar? And that gets into testing. And that gets into all the stuff we talked about. So the pitfall I see is, you come into an organization, they don't believe in testing. And I say believe, though. Usually an organization that says, oh, we do a lot of testing, it's kind of a red flag to me that they don't know how to do testing. That mindset, the culture, and the tooling for testing, I think is really important.
If you want to support the show, the number one thing you can do is go to thefreetoaster.com and sign up for our newsletter. You're going to get a couple pieces per week of news, information, insights, and podcasts like the one you're listening to right now at the intersection of marketing, lending, and technology. That's our niche. We don't plan to go outside of that. It's the only publication I've seen out there on the internet that dials into this zone. So if you want to support us, sign up and share it in your favorite Slack channel.
So it sounds like you're saying almost all organizations test, but there's like right and wrong ways to test. Like what are some telltale signs that the testing culture is not quite there?
When you first talk to a client, usually if you ask them to describe their operation, they'll describe it the way they want it to be, not the way it is. And so typically the thing I look for is, we're really good at testing. We don't need any help with that. That's usually a pretty telltale sign that something's off.
How would that come out if it was kind of a healthier testing culture?
We do as much testing as we can. A lot of times we struggle with making sense of it all. We could sure do a lot better. You got any thoughts on it? I'd love to hear it. But that's,
It was more of an open-minded versus, no, this is locked down. It's perfect. Okay.
Yeah. Or the, the other thing you'll see is a bunch of burden. If you burden your tests with a lot of constraints, like, in order for us to spend money on this test, you've got to go fill out these forms, and we've got to, fill out the full economics for 18 months on what the performance is going to be at the individual level for everything that goes through it, and validate the, you put a bunch of hurdles in place so that it just sort of keeps testing down. Like, that's not going to be super helpful.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I would imagine some kind of testing budget is set aside, and there's a leader who's empowered to make calls and drop tests, and is ultimately held accountable for learning over some period of time. And maybe the leader above them in the organization it's been a year and that testing budget hasn't been deployed fruitfully, could hold that individual accountable, et cetera. That to me feels like a healthier.
Yeah, I think a testing budget, I think, is very healthy.
Yeah.
It should be some portion ratio of the spend is going to go against testing. And then there's a plan that says, here's the things, we think the big gains are going to come from this, this, and this. And then here's the tactical stuff we're going to do in these categories, right? We report out on a regular basis. And as stuff starts to work, we promote it into the control process and gets out of test and control. And then there's a whole new set of things. Like that's kind of that's what you want to see.
That jives with what I've seen in the past as well. So let's hit this one in maybe just like a few minutes here, Rich, as we wrap up. But the 10th one, it sounded like some form of like death by committee, something like that. What does that pitfall look like?
Yeah, I get asked a lot about cycle time too. When you're doing a direct mail campaign, there are some, there's a critical path to making pieces of direct mail. There's designing the creative, there's understanding your variable fields and making sure that the mail file, when it's created, has the right variable fields in it to the extent you want to personalize it. And then there's the actual production process of putting ink on paper and going into the USPS and then trucking your pieces to the right distribution center so that they get sent to the optimal. There's a bunch of kind of long or critical path stuff that needs to happen. And you'll never be faster than that. But you can make yourself really slow if you want to. And the way to do that is to have a bunch of different people approving stuff. And that is an absolute killer. So now you don't want to have a system where your legal and compliance folks aren't looking over your stuff. But at the same time, we can't put them, we have to be very careful in putting them on critical path. And then getting into a revision cycle, right? So I had a client once where, it was like, well, legal and compliance gets 5 days to review creative. And if they have a comment, then they have another 5 days to review the revision to the comment. Okay, you can't run a system that way.
I can see how that gets out of control.
You can't run a system that way. And so that's part of that, death by 1,000 committees. And there's nothing against legal compliance folks. You absolutely have to have that. You can't not have that. But, the best practice is to have that embedded in the system, right? So there's a legal compliance person day-to-day interacting with the stuff that we're working on, has an intimate understanding of that which we've done before and is blessed, and that which we have not done before and just hasn't been blessed yet, and is able to sort of maneuver in there in real time and not force revision cycles after revision cycles. Same thing on the finance side, right? So a lot of places, I think it's a good practice where you say, I'm going to spend a bunch of money this month. They say, okay, well, what's going to happen with that? So I got a model out. Well, here's the curve. I'm going to get these accounts come in, and they're going to charge-offs are going to start here, and they're going to look like this, and then the attrition curve is going to look like this. So this is pretty. You should be doing that. If you're not doing that, then you get a different issue. But then the question is, so do we put that in the critical path? Do I need a signature on that? Do I have to go present to a different group to get approval for my money? I would argue you shouldn't. I mean, you should have guidelines in place. You should have regular reporting in place, but. That's another thing you see, especially in a bigger organization, is the separate finance sign-off. A whole separate set of materials that need to be created, and a separate set of conversations. We talked about brand. So a lot of times brand wants to know, how are we talking to our customers? How are we using our brand? What's our voice? All good stuff, but needs to happen in the system. Needs to happen as the pieces are being created. Right. So there's, you want to work on the flow of the direct mail piece. So the direct mail piece is being created. Everybody needs to sort of make themselves available in that time span, in that process, right? You always want to go to the furthest downstream system you can and work on your availability based on that, as opposed to saying, well, I review creatives every Monday, right? Like to me, that's not an appropriate way. Like, I review creatives as they're being created. I help create creatives. I'm a legal compliance person. I work with the folks doing creative to design all the pieces. You want to get, so sorry, to sum up, I think you want to understand your critical path. That is, what's the fastest you can actually get the thing done. And then work on stripping everything out other than that. Have everything work off critical path on that timeline.
This may be too like rainbows and sunshine for most banks, but I'll tell you the thing I worry about most, something like this, is you mentioned brand and compliance, so let's just run with that for a second. Any feedback they have could hit marketing. So like legal says change this, and then marketing looks at it like, well, that's not gonna work. We also need to convert, right? It needs to be compliant and it needs to work. So I worry about operating in series where you have different stakeholders who are taking time to review, and then it comes back, but then it hits a different stakeholder who's like, hold on, if we're gonna do that thing, then I don't want to even run this creative. I want to actually flip it and do something different because like that blows up the whole thesis behind the so that gets really gnarly when you get stuck in these spirals. So like my rainbows and sunshine answer to this is cross-functional team sitting in a room, everybody, brand, legal, compliance, marketing, finance, everybody that needs you. And you're jamming, you're co-creating the thing. And you're done. Everyone in the room has had a way, like you've had your negotiations and your battles or whatever. You leave the room, and then maybe there's other folks from those maybe more senior people that weren't in the room that can still get their eyes on it and could still tweak a little bit on the margins. But it's not a full-blown in-series review that could like blow it up. Like, have you ever seen anything like that?
Yeah, I think a pod system, I think, works. Again, in a big organization, that's probably the only way to do it. Where I can remember saying, I'll give up one of my headcount and give it to compliance to bring on a person and just have them dedicated to the direct mail. Right? And I think that's the pod system. Yeah. So your one job is to sit with me and the teams are designing stuff and make sure we do it right without a review. That makes a lot of sense. The other thing I'm thinking of as you're talking through it, I mean, we had this conversation offline, but I think these big household name marketers are super overstaffed. And I think that creates a lot of this, right? It's not really even necessary. It's just because we got all these teams, and one of their responsibilities is to review the mail, so they build a mail review system that has spirals in it. I might try just hacking the resources out of it. You don't need that many people to do this, and that might actually be the best thing to do if you're one of these big organizations, 200 people looking at this stuff.
It's hard to get 20 people to agree on what are we having for lunch. Let alone what are we doing where there's data, there's models, there's there's no reasonable way a group that large is going to agree, right? Of course they're going to be gridlocked almost by design.
Well, I think part of that's why the fintechs have done so well, because they typically don't have that, and they can just move a lot faster.
And they're wrong half the time, but they learn and they iterate, and as long as they don't blow themselves up, they end up being pretty dangerous.
That's the model, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Rich, this was awesome, man. This was close to 2 hours on your 10 common pitfalls in direct mail, but we went super deep and I took a bunch of notes.
Yeah, I wish I had better. I mean, I picked pitfalls that don't necessarily have clean answers. So
But that's the nice thing about this channel, or I guess one of the interesting things about the channel is that it is somewhat messy. I think that's why some organizations shy away from it or dip their toe in and get scared and exit. But as we were talking about earlier, it's too big to ignore for most lenders. As is affiliate marketing, that's one thing I just say over and over again. When I meet lenders that aren't in the channel, that I always get curious around, like, why are you knowingly giving market share to your competitors? Like, I mean, people are shopping in these channels and they're going to pick a product, whether you're there or not. They're going to transact. So you're essentially gifting market share to your...
Oh, no, I have a question for you. So I've been with plenty of clients who have a very hard time getting engaged on the affiliates, right? Finding a way to get your product in there.
Yeah. It's a common problem.
I'm a startup lender. I'm just getting things cranked up. I'm doing some online lead gen. I've got a website up and running. I got the funnel working. Maybe I'm doing some direct mail. Now I want to go get on Karma. You can't just pick up the phone and call Karma.
No, or any of them. Nerd wallet experience, like Karma's not unique in that sense. They're all hard to get into, and it's really just the economic incentives are they're very unbalanced in the early days. Because from the lender perspective, anything they get in the channel is incremental, tends to be incremental, and it tends to add to their top and bottom line. That is not the case for the publisher. The publishers almost always
It's an investment.
it is an investment. It doesn't hurt them financially, generally speaking. What ends up happening most of the time is the new fintech comes in, and what would have gone to a bigger brand ends up like some small portion ends up going to the fintech. So the top line for the publisher is almost a wash. Hard for them to tell what happened. But now they have a BD person that needs to be involved, a compliance person, an ops. Like there's a decent amount of overhead and like onboarding. And that's what prevents them from being excited in the early days. What gets them ultimately excited over time is lenders that serve incremental audiences, where like the big household names don't play, or just has a new take on something, right? It could be like a recent example is like a vehicle secured credit card, and there's a player out there that gives very high limits, $5,000, $10,000 limits to subprime users if they're willing to back the card with their auto title. So that's kind of a new thing. So the platforms tend to be a little bit more curious when it comes to those like fundamentally different val props, but even those don't really move the top line in the early days. The fintechs would have to get scale before it really moves the needle for the publisher. So it's the economic incentives that aren't quite there. The other practicality of it too is the partnership and BD teams tend to actually be one group of folks, and it's not usually a very big team. So imagine folks that have to deal with all the household name brands who are very, let's call it high touch. They have lots of demands, lots of questions. They're important to the organization. And those folks are on you with things to do. They're on your task list. And then little fintech from Houston or from Austin or whoever knocks on your door and they're like, hey, I want to do 1,000 account. It's like, it's a very low priority for you if you're in that seat because your job is a combination of BD, but also managing existing. Those are kind of some of the fundamentals underneath that. Ultimately, it becomes like a sales and relationship thing. You have to have access to the right people at the platforms to even have the conversation. And then once you have the conversation, you have to be able to convince them that maybe not day one, but day 180, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, onboarding this lender could be a meaningful change to the business or to the consumer. So yeah, no, it's a legitimately hard problem. I have clients that come to me they just need me to solve that. And I can't make promises, unfortunately. What I can do is sit there and ask them questions. And I ultimately only take clients where I have enough conviction that I can make a convincing case to the platform because for as much as those platforms, I have relationships with folks and I've worked with many of them in the past. They don't just onboard people that I bring for fun. It still has to make sense for them economically. So it makes my job quite a bit harder.
That's one thing we don't have in direct mail.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of similarities, and that's not one of them.
Yeah, no, that's what I love
Because
about
anybody
it.
can send mail out.
That's the thing. I think that's why they end up being very complementary, right? Is direct mail's permissionless.
That's right. Exactly right.
Just like this podcast. Nobody
you can opt out of pre-screening, but you can't opt out of mail.
Yeah, no, it's great. To play an affiliate and do it right and at scale, you do need permission from the partner. Sometimes you just don't agree with the calls they make. Like, oh, well, that really is in your best interest. And they don't always operate rationally because they're constrained by a number of things that are hard for the lender to see. While it sometimes appears irrational, there's usually an explanation why they do or don't move. So, well, Rich, been a pleasure.
Thanks,
We're going to
Carl.
sign off, and until the next time.
Thank you.